Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Scott, the first time you bought a rental property, things didn't work out that great. What happened?
Yeah, I bought a condo in Scottsdale, Arizona, right at the height of the market in 2008. And it was an apartment building where they were converting them into condos. And my father bought one and I bought one. And unfortunately, the market crashed right after. And I had to deal with negative cash flow for about 10 years. And then when I finally sold it, I think I lost maybe about 15 to 20,000.
And you were also losing money every month. How much were you losing?
I was probably losing about in the range of 200 to 300 every month for a total of 10 years.
On the podcast today, we're going to figure out why Scott's first deal went so bad and how he lost so much money, what he learned from that, and what he's doing today to make sure that his rentals are profitable. I also want to talk to Scott about something he's doing that's a little bit unique. He bought some vacant land and he lets people park their RVs on the land. And he's making pretty good money doing that. So on the show today, we're going to learn more about that. Joining us on the podcast today from Georgia is Scott Curry. We'll take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Scott. Are you thinking about investing in rental properties, but maybe you don't know where to start? My friends at Mid-South Home Buyers make it simple. For over 23 years, they've been selling fully renovated turnkey rental properties in Memphis and Little Rock. We're talking new roofs, plumbing, electric, kitchens, bathrooms. Everything is brand new and done right. And here's the best part. Every property comes with a well-qualified tenant in place before you close. That means you get cash flow from day one. Plus, Mid-South continues to professionally manage the property for you after the sale, and they back it up with two powerful guarantees. You get a 1-year total maintenance warranty and a lifetime occupancy guarantee. Personally, I've bought 5 properties from them and I couldn't be happier. If you want to talk to someone that's been through the process, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you're ready to get started, just go to midsouthhomebuyers.com. That's midsouthhomebuyers.com. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property. And when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056. Scott, let's talk about your first rental and figure out what went wrong and why that didn't work out. And then we'll get into your portfolio today. So tell me about that first property you bought.
It was around 2007 or 8. And the market was really frothy. There was people that were, making great sums of money in short periods of time, specifically in the Scottsdale, like Phoenix area. And that's where my father-in-law was, and he was in the process of buying some condos there. So I went with my father and checked it out, and the cash flow was not good, but I got kind of sucked into the excitement of how much condos were appreciating, and I ended up buying one, and my father ended up buying one as well.
All right, so going into it, you never, or I guess you weren't looking at this is going to make me money monthly. You were thinking, I'm going to buy this, it's going to appreciate, and I'm going to make $100,000 or whatever number you had in mind.
Yeah, interestingly enough, like a year earlier, I had bought some vacant land, and I held that for like 6 months and made like, I don't know, 30,000. So
Hmm.
I kind of just expected it to just do the same thing again
Right.
and make even more money. So I was really not concentrating at all on the prospect or possibility that I would be holding on to it for a really long time.
Right. Okay. So losing money. So like you said you were losing $200 or $300 a month. That wasn't really a big deal because you thought I'm going to get this huge payoff 6 months or a year from now.
Exactly. That was really not in my universe that
Right.
this would
Okay.
be a long-term hold at all.
Right. Okay. So, like all the things that you would look at today when you're going to buy a rental property, like checking out the neighborhood, making sure that this is a property that's going to cover all the expenses. That wasn't even something that was remotely something you were looking at.
I mean, I always put eyes on any property I buy, so I at least did that to where I looked at like the floor plans and I kind of chose the one that I wanted, and I did walk the neighborhood and drove around it. I did that at least just because I wanted to make sure it had good resale, but
Right.
I really wasn't doing it for the purpose of, you know, how a renter might
Right.
perceive the property
Right.
or how much more I could get if maybe I got an extra bedroom or something.
And I think that's an interesting lesson, and something that people should really consider is that in 2008, 2007, when people were buying rental properties, they weren't really analyzing them. And I think that's how people got in trouble, where if you had focused more on cash flow, I get the impression that maybe this property would have turned out differently.
Yeah, or maybe I would have focused in a different area where I knew I could get good cash flow along with maybe conservative
Hmm.
appreciation.
Right.
But it was not in my mindset at
Yep.
all that this would be a long-term hold and that I might get burned and have
Right.
to keep it for years and years, which I ultimately had to keep it for about 10 years. And then when I sold it, it wasn't as much of a loss if I had sold it in 2008,
Right. Because the market had
but
come
it was
back.
still a loss.
Right. Okay. All right. So you got out of that property, and then how long did it take you before you decided I'm going to try this again?
It was probably a good 10 years
Oh, was it really?
or
Okay.
or more. Yeah.
Yeah. So walk me through how this happened, because I think this is an interesting story. So you were living in California, and you decided that you wanted to move somewhere, but you weren't really sure where you wanted to move to.
Yeah, so we had been looking to leave California for a while, and with the pandemic and the lockdowns, and just how California is in regards to cash flowing rentals there is super difficult. And I just ultimately wanted to raise my kids in another area. So we um, purchased a travel trailer and then we crisscrossed the US in looking for areas just to live, not necessarily to do a rental portfolio. And we ultimately just decided on Georgia, kind of near the Georgia Tennessee border. And we bought a house, which we actually were not super happy with, but thought, you know what, we could rent this house out and it would cash flow decently until we basically would buy our dream house.
Okay. Wow. All right. So you sold your house in California, you bought an RV, and you just traveled the country and just said, We're gonna explore different areas and stumble on a place that we want to live."
Yeah, we were traveling for about 3 months.
That's so
A
awesome.
family of five in like a 27-foot travel trailer, so it was pretty tight and
Wow.
uncomfortable. But when I look back on it, it actually had was one of the best things I could have ever done as far as spending time with my
Yeah.
kids um and just enjoying that moment in time with my family. And yeah, it worked out great.
Yeah.
We ultimately found, where we live now.
All right. So you found this town in Georgia. You decided you wanted to to live there. You bought your first house, and then did you start buying rental properties after that?
Yeah, so then it took a good 6 months to find our quote unquote dream house, which ended up not being our dream house. So I ended up Airbnb-ing that house. Um, and I do Airbnb or I sometimes do long-term rental depending on the season on that property. Um, and then maybe about another 6 months later, I purchased a property that was always intended to be a rental property, and that was a 5 bedroom, uh, 3 bath house that is actually still rented to the same person that I rented it to about 4 years ago.
Awesome. So tell me about your portfolio. What does your portfolio look like today?
Well, basically every year or sometimes a little bit less, I would buy a house, and I ultimately got up to about 4 houses that I was renting out. They were all quite large and they were getting close to like the 1% rule. So I was pretty happy with that. But then in doing research with different podcasts and such, I saw that mobile home and RV parks, you could make, a better profit as far as cash flow. Um, and I ended up buying some land and developing some land into um, what I thought was going to be 4 mobile home pads. I ultimately decided to convert that property into 8 RV pads, where I don't own the RVs. I just have full-time RV owners that park their vehicles on there.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's talk about the RVs in a minute, but before we get
Mhm.
into that, let's talk about the single families that you bought. So you mentioned that these are bigger houses. A lot of times with rentals, people prefer smaller houses just because there's less square footage, less maintenance. But it sounds like you're having pretty good luck with a bigger house.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like it was kind of a pocket listing, the first house from a realtor that I was using, and I kind of just crunched the numbers, and they seemed to work. And it was never kind of on my radar that a larger house may or may not be a good investment.
Mhm.
It just seemed like a good deal, and it did cash flow quite well. So I just pulled the trigger on that, and then I ultimately stumbled into the next rental because it was the next door neighbor that was selling that house. And I thought it would be nice to have 2 rentals right next to each other.
Yeah.
But then ultimately, like doing research on different podcasts, I found that the larger houses can be good because the tenants tend to stay quite a while
Yeah.
because the family size, they're not looking to level up any higher than a 5 bedroom, so they stay a
Right.
while.
So all your properties are 5 bedrooms.
Close to, yeah,
Okay.
like 4 or 5 bedrooms.
Yeah, I mean, 5 bedroom houses are. I think they're difficult to find. I mean, I don't see a lot of 5 bedrooms. So if you get a family in there, like it's almost like it's hard for them to find another 5 bedroom. So they might stay for a really long time.
Yeah, it's been pretty true to that,
Yeah.
you know, uh, idea. And most of them do stay a while. But sometimes they don't. But like you said, there's not very many of them. I'm usually the only 5 bedroom within, a 20 or 30 mile radius.
Right.
When I, do my research and see what else, what are the competitors I have.
So is it kind of a rural area that you're in?
Yes and no. I'm like, maybe about 20 to 15 miles to Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is
Okay.
a decent sized city. So I'm not really out in the boonies, so to speak, but each property does have between like 1 acre and another property has 18 acres. So they are larger properties, but
Wow.
they aren't too far from a major city.
How do you deal with the lawn? Do you take care of that, or do you have your tenants take care of the lawn?
So my Airbnb, I take care of it, but on the other properties, I do have the tenants take care of that, specifically on the 1 acre properties. I
How
will
is
tell you though, like when tenants are about to leave, they tend to defer and not do, the lawn
yeah,
and the picking up the leaves like they should, so that when they leave, it's there's usually quite a bit of work for me to do.
right. And on just a regular week that you haven't had trouble with them keeping up in the grass, like that they haven't let it go for maybe a little bit longer than they should have.
No, they tend to be pretty good.
Good.
And then if I do see that it's getting out of hand, I will send them a text and ask that they take care of it.
Okay.
And I have it specifically listed in the lease that they do take care of it. But like I mentioned before, when they get towards the end of the lease and they're not going to renew, they do tend
Yeah.
to skip.
Now let's talk about your RV park. So this is not mobile homes. These are RVs that people are parking if they're going to stay somewhere for a period of time.
Yeah, so I'm not interested in doing a traditional RV park where people are coming and going all the time because I have a full-time job. So my idea was, well, if people are staying long term, which a lot of RV parks do not allow people to stay long term, I could kind of set myself apart from all the other RV parks, and I don't end up having to have somebody physically there, and I don't have to show up and explain to people where they're supposed to park. And so it works out really great because I don't get much turnover. I request that people stay for at least 6 months or more. And then, think my pedestals that have the electric and stuff don't get damaged by people backing into them as often because people are staying for long periods of time.
So you have to supply, I guess you give the electric and then you have like a water hookup too.
Yeah, so I'm also kind of a little bit out in the boonies as well. So I don't have sewer hookup. So I had to install septic tanks, which can be a little expensive, but you can recoup that investment pretty
Yeah.
fast. But I have sewer, water, electric, which I separately meter for each individual spot, which is kind of the more expensive utility to pay for. So I decided to put that into the tenant's responsibility. And then I am responsible for the water, and then I have fiber Wi-Fi that people can just log into.
What was involved in getting that set up? So you bought land that I assume was just land. Did you have to put in roads and get the utilities brought in? Like what was involved in getting that set up?
Yeah, so the key to this situation was to find an area that didn't have really any zoning rules or restrictions. So this area was kind of the Wild West when it came to zoning, which has its drawbacks too, because there's a mechanic that's got some pretty large vehicles and such that's a neighbor of mine, so anybody can do anything they want in this area. But yes, I had to bring in some roads, but it's only like 2.2 acres is the land that I bought, so it wasn't too bad as far as roads were concerned. But they definitely are expensive. Then I had to dig trenching for the water and the electric to go into. And then I also had to put in a few septic tanks as well. So, ultimately I purchased the land for about 35,000, and then I put about 120,000 into the roads and utilities and pads and everything.
All right. So you're all in like right around 150, 160, somewhere around there.
Exactly.
And then how much rent does it bring in every month?
So each pad is around $500. Um, and my utilities that I pay ends up being, oh, and the maintenance as far as mowing and such might be about $200. And I typically keep about 7 spots that are continuously rented. So what is that, like 3,500 a month?
3,500 a month. Wow,
Yep.
that is a pretty good return.
Hmm.
Is there any management at all? Like, is there anything that you have to do? You know, maybe are there any ever problems between tenants or anything you need to get involved with?
Yeah, so my rules list has sort of evolved. Before somebody moves on, I have them sign a 2-page list of rules. And as different things have come up, like, dogs that consistently bark, um, or, just random things that evolve, I kind of add that to the list. And usually there's like one particular tenant that's pretty sensitive that maybe lives there full time and doesn't work, that will kind of keep me updated on noises or disturbances that I need to be aware of. And then I just email that person directly and let them know that they're in violation of the rules that they signed. And normally they're pretty good about correcting that.
So if someone is looking to do something like this, like buy some land and turn it into an RV park, what are some characteristics to look for in land?
Just really make sure you do your research on the zoning, because it's usually pretty rare that an area has no zoning. So usually there will be zoning, and you'll have to make sure that you don't have to get some kind of variance in order to put it in, because that's going to create issues where neighbors are going to have input on what you put there, and then possibly stymie your ability to put the RV park there. Another thing that's important is finding really good contractors and people that can help you put in all those roads and utilities. And then depending on your availability, you might want to structure it the way I did, where it's full time, so you're not having to hire someone or to be there on a regular basis, to have sort of like weekenders come, so to speak.
Is it hard to find people with RVs? Like, how do you advertise?
Primarily it's Facebook, and that's free. And I get a lot of people on Facebook. I actually right now have a waiting list because I've already rented out all the spots, and people just keep on messaging me, and I keep the advertisement up on Facebook because I would like to build up a kind of a waiting list, so to speak. And I just keep that list there for once something becomes available.
If anybody wants to reach out to Scott, I've got his contact information on the website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 527. I'd like to thank our sponsors for making today's episode possible. Mid-South Homebuyers. If you're looking for instant cash flow on day one, check out midsouthhomebuyers.com. And if you're looking to finance a rental property, whether you're just getting started or you want to add to your portfolio, check out ridgelendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Make sure you hit that follow button. I put out a new episode every single Tuesday, and if you're following the show, you'll get notified when the next episode comes out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.